I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Okay, welcome back. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple, if you could just take a moment to hit that follow button or subscribe and rate us. You know, if it's a 5, that's great. If it's not, just keep scrolling, and keep those thoughts to yourself. But no, it does help me with sponsors to show that people are interested in this and following along with The Weekly. I have another housekeeping note just before I introduce my guest for this week. And that is, if you are interested in being a guest co-host with me, please let me know. I did a shout out on LinkedIn and Instagram, and if we're not connected, please do connect with me. But I'm looking for, I've had a few journalists on, and I have another journalist on today, but I'm also interested in different CEOs, different small business owners. I think it's important to have other people's perspectives on these news stories and how it affects them. For a long time, when I read these articles, I was reading it through the lens of an employee. And then after meeting a lot of these business owners, you get to see kind of a different perspective. So again, if you're interested, please let me know. So speaking of guests, I have the one and only Rob Smith with me today. Hi, Rob.
Nice to be here, Rachel. There's a lot of Rob Smiths, by the way. I'm not the one and only.
That's fair. That's true. We were getting drinks recently, and I was telling you about all the people that I wanted to have on this podcast, and I was listing off all these badass people, and I realized that they're all women. So I just want to thank you for being, as a straight white man, my diversity hire for the podcast.
Well, nobody's ever said that to me before quite that way, but I'm glad I can help out.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I have a few great guys lined up, but yeah, I'm happy they're here. So a little bit about Rob. He is the executive editor for both Seattle Magazine and Seattle Business Magazine. Prior to that, he was the editor-in-chief for the Puget Sound Business Journal. And before that, the editor-in-chief for the Portland Business Journal, along with a few other consulting and freelance work. So a lot of news on your side. Why are you so passionate about the news?
Well, I like getting paid to be nosy. And when I got into this, I wasn't originally going to be a journalist, but as Mark Twain said, I had no other skills. So I became a journalist.
Oh, there you go. I like that. Well, let's jump in. I'm going to go over the top. We're doing five stories today for you, and I'll let you know what they are. And then Rob and I will get into it. So first one is Boeing drama, and that's all I'm going to say. It's Boeing drama. You'll find out more. And then we've got In-N-Out coming to Washington. Pfizer shuts down construction of the Seagen facility. Phase Genomics gets a grant from the Gates Foundation. And our college athletes' employees. We are going to find out. So are you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. Okay, so this first one, it's sort of two separate stories happening here, all under the Boeing headline. I'm going to do my best to explain what's happening, and Rob, you can jump in where I've missed out. But basically, there's this fuselage supplier, and a fuselage is the body of the aircraft, so the outer shell. So when the door plug fell off, that was part of the fuselage, so that you can think about that. The fuselage supplier is Spirit Aerosystems, not to be confused with Spirit Airlines, okay? Spirit Aerosystems creates the body of the aircraft that has been having problems. Now, Spirit Aerosystems has been having some public issues. They've had 2 manufacturing issues in 2023, and then obviously this most recent one with the door plug. Now, Boeing used to they had their own manufacturing plants that are making their own fuselages back in the day. And then in 2005, they sell those manufacturing plants, which then creates Spirit Aerosystems. So they separate. Now, the news headline that came out last week is that Boeing is saying, just kidding, we want you back. Sorry about that. Please come back to us. Please come under. So they want to buy back Spirit Aerosystems. That is story one. And I think we can unpack that a little bit, but it's in relation to this other story. So while this is all happening, we've got the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, so we'll be calling that the NTSB. So Jennifer Hamady, she's the chair. She comes out publicly and says, Boeing hasn't been working with us for 2 months. They have not been giving us the work documents. They've not been giving us the names of people that have been working on the plane, specifically that door plug area. And she said, you have 48 hours to provide this or else, like a ransom. And then immediately Boeing sends them information and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. We've been cooperating this whole time. And Jennifer comes back and says, I stand by my statement. No, you have not. So just like an interesting drama here. And one note was, for example, they were just informed that the 3 Spirit Aerosystems mechanics that worked in the Renton facility to repair, the poorly installed door plug, were not direct Spirit Aerosystems employees, but actually contractors from a different aerospace staffing company. So that's just an example of some of the stuff they're finding out. What did I miss in this story, Rob? What did you pull from those articles?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts here, Rachel. And this is really interesting. Spirit is Boeing's largest supplier for commercial planes. And Spirit has been at the center of several recent problems with manufacturing quality on both the MAX and the Dreamliner, as you were saying. Mm-hmm. And, but I think first and foremost, I think there's a couple of things going on here. Boeing's, and this isn't a done deal yet, right. Boeing's potential acquisition could help stabilize its defense business and give it a stronger hand in bidding on future military aircraft programs. So Spirit's revenue was something like $650 million in defense work in 2022. It's projected to be up to $1 billion by 2025. So this is clearly a play by Boeing to get more contracts and more business for the U.S. military. And like you say, it's kind of a back to the future thing, right? Mm-hmm. We're bringing back a part of Boeing that has really been separate since 2005.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to me. And I also think, even though Spirit and Boeing have had some quality control issues, this gives Boeing a little bit more control over its supply chain. Mm-hmm. So I think this makes sense. This was obviously in the works well before Boeing's problems, recent problems. And I think this makes sense for Boeing. And I think I agree with Boeing when they said this is good for the shareholders and this is good for the company. I think this is a good strategic move.
Okay.
And something else I will say that you did a great job of setting up what's happening with Boeing right now. Mm-hmm. Boeing's stock really did not take that big of a hit from any of this stuff.
Really?
It's hovering around $200 a share, a little bit less than it was before these issues, but it's only down about 5% the past year. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, Boeing is still, if not a darling of investors, they're not being punished by investors right now, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I kind of thought they were wanting to take them under their wing just with all the issues and wanting to not have the disconnect between the two companies and taking them under their wing so they can have under their wing. Funny. So they can have like the quality control like you mentioned. There was one note in here that stood out to me is that before this door plug issue, Boeing had given more funding to Spirit Aerosystems, and Spirit Aerosystems had increased their pricing, basically putting more funding into this because they wanted to increase production rates. Now listen, I would love to go to Palm Springs. I don't need you to rush to make this plane to take me there. Okay? Like take your time. We don't need to be making airplanes faster. Let's just slow it down. But that speaks to that's corporate America, is that we're always trying to make things faster and make more revenue. Like, do you feel like there's a line at some point where we don't need to be making that many airplanes that quickly?
Well, let me answer it this way. I think you're very astute to point that out because this is clearly helping Boeing manage rates of aircraft production. Mm-hmm. And they're in business to make money.
Yeah.
And I also think, sort of to your point, this is going to help them address some of the quality issues that have had these cascading effects. You don't go buy a company because of one specific incident. Mm-hmm. This is probably a broader set of circumstances here. They've recognized what happens when there are quality issues and delays and all the other things that were tripping up Spirit, and that fundamentally impacts the ability to do business.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think Boeing, again, I think this is a very strategic acquisition and good for Boeing. I think this is going to benefit Boeing in the long run. Okay.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We'll see what happens with, what happens with the NTSB and their investigation of what went wrong. There's also a parallel criminal investigation by the Department of Justice that's going on, and that might impact some of how people are informing the NTSB, and they might lawyer up. And I just think that's going to be really interesting to watch. I also think if we find out that it was David's fault and he forgot to put the rivets in the door plug, is that really solving anything though? We don't need to put David in jail. He was probably overworked and I feel bad. So let's think about, the efficiencies and the expectations and the resources and all of that. And that's kind of what you were just talking about.
Well, and, and talking about the investors, the other thing, American Airlines just ordered a whole bunch of Boeing planes.
Oh.
Boeing is still getting orders.
Yeah, so this hasn't slowed them down.
No, this one specific incident or a couple of these incidents have certainly not slowed them down. But I think they do need to do a little bit of navel gazing and figure out what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep following that story. I I know Boeing's been making quite the news these days. All right, our next story. This one's a fun one. In-N-Out signaling plans for Washington State. Rob, do you like In-N-Out burgers?
I've never had an In-N-Out burger. Have you?
Never. Yes, I used to live in San Diego, so they were all over in California. Yeah.
Are they as good as everybody says they are?
I don't know because a lot of it's just about the hype. I personally, I might get in trouble for this, but personally, I like Dick's Burgers up here in Seattle. Shout out to Jasmine Donovan, CEO of Dick's Burgers.
I like Dick's Burgers too.
Yeah.
And Big Macs up on Queen Anne.
Oh, okay. So the story here is that they've submitted an application for Ridgefield, Washington in Clark County. That is, to give context, it's 15 minutes north of Vancouver, Washington, which is right next to Portland, Oregon. So they still need to get permits to build. There's still a lot of stuff that has to happen. But I did see that once construction starts, once they get all of that approved, it'll take about 8 to 9 months for them to open from that time. So it's not going to be opening tomorrow. We've got some ways away, but they do have plans for Ridgefield. Something I thought was kind of funny about, well, actually, first of all, I should say, I know them from San Diego, from California. I thought it was just a California brand. Guess how many states they're in?
7.
Ooh, you're close. 8. It's, and for those listening, if you can guess them, California, Oregon, Nevada, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Texas. I had no idea. It's crazy.
Well, and I believe the closest one here is just outside of Salem, Oregon, in a place called Kaiser.
Oh.
And I've got a buddy who lives in Salem, and I called him last night because I knew we were going to be talking about this.
Yeah.
And he says he never goes there because the lines are too long.
They're known
literally
for that.
around the block, and he estimates that some people will wait in line 45 minutes for a hamburger. Would you wait in line 45 minutes for a hamburger?
I don't think so. Well, depends on how much I was drinking that night. Maybe.
How long did you wait in San Diego?
I don't remember, but they are known for their long waits, and people do because it's got that hype. So I mean, they're doing something right with their marketing if people are waiting that long for it.
Well, and whether they open in Ridgefield or not, who knows?
Yeah.
They have to do mitigation and parking and ingress and egress and things like that. Because, in Portland, Portlanders were waiting for it to open in suburbs of Beaverton, Hillsborough, or Tualatin for years now. There have been rumors and plans, but none of that came to fruition. That's all stagnant.
Do you have a speculation as to why? Because they have other Oregon places.
I don't know why. That's a great question.
I was thinking, because if it was going to be something around like state taxes or whatever, they have other Oregon locations. So what about Portland are they having a hard time with? I'd be curious to know.
Well, I would think they would be doing their due diligence before announcing some of these plans. So I don't know. Well, let me ask you this. You won't wait 45 minutes, or maybe you will under certain circumstances. Would you drive down to Ridgefield just to get an In-N-Out burger?
I think I'm biased because I had it for so many years. So to me, and I don't know. I think there's probably people listening that would. I don't think I would. I think I'm too into Dick's Burgers these days. I don't know. But okay, so something else interesting in this article is that they say that the In-N-Out building will be unique and really high quality and darker colors. And when I read that, I'm like, listen, we get it. I get it. It's not as sunny here in the Pacific Northwest. It rains. Fine. Make our In-N-Out darker. I get it.
Well, and it's, and let's remember too, because it's still very early on in the development process. Mm-hmm. But city permits and approvals, who knows how this is going to play out. Yeah. Well,
one question before we move on this is, how do you feel about some of these places that are so iconic to where they started? For example, there's this restaurant in the South called Raising Cane's, and it's moving. I think it is moving or moved to Seattle. Not moved, I shouldn't say. They opened a location in Seattle. And then personally, Dutch Bros Coffee, if you know them, they started in Grants Pass, Oregon. It was very great for me and Eugene growing up with that, and now you'll see them in other places. So how do you feel about these things that are like so iconically part of one place going everywhere else? Are they turning into McDonald's,
Well, I don't think anybody's going to turn into McDonald's. Yeah. And, the era of that kind of expansion, I think, is over. I think it's good. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
I don't think there's any danger they're only in 8 states. And the whole thing with McDonald's is, of course, you can go to one in Tokyo, you can go to one here, you can go to one in Texas. It's all going to be the same thing. Mm. You're going to get the same thing.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
And now, have you had an In-N-Out burger any place but San Diego?
No, I don't think so.
So you have nothing to compare it to.
That's true.
You don't know.
That's true. Yeah.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah.
We hear about this, and just the excitement, just the very fact that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, and people are excited.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know anybody who's going to drive down to Ridgefield just for a hamburger, but I bet there are people here who will.
I bet you're right. Oh, I absolutely. I mean, it's got a huge following for sure.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I'll just go to Dick's.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. So next up, we've got Pfizer shutting down Seagen's $350 million construction project in Everett, Washington. Who are these players? Pfizer, a huge pharma company, I think most people know. Seagen is the largest biotech company in the Seattle area. It's headquartered in Bothell, Washington. Why is this an interesting story? So back in December, Pfizer acquires Seagen for a casual $43 billion. They do that in December, and Seagen had already started building this manufacturing facility in Everett. It was going to house 200 employees. They had already started. They were using Skanska, the construction company, for a $200 million contract with Skanska. They've already started building it, and, Pfizer, when they acquire Seagen, as when most people acquire, are like, no, we're not going to do anything. We're totally going to support you. We just want to help you be better. And we definitely, there's a quote about them wanting to keep the Seattle business, and I think San Francisco, I think it is. And then they announced last week, we are halting construction on this building, and everything that was going to be manufactured there is actually going to be manufactured in North Carolina instead. So what are your thoughts on this story?
This one's a little bit confounding to me. I was very surprised. I mean, this deal only closed. This is the largest biopharma deal in the last 5 years since prior to the pandemic.
I didn't know that. Okay.
By far.
Wow.
And I don't know. This closed in December, so 3 months later. Why do they wait 3 months?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Why not say something in December? This is clearly not something they just woke up in January and said, we need to do this. Mm-hmm. They had this planned all along. And I don't know why they strung this out a little bit the way that they did. But I do think it points to the importance of headquartered companies. In more years in business journalism that I care to tell you, there's always a debate. Does it matter if something's headquartered somewhere? So Seagen is no longer headquartered here. Seagen's gone. And now you lose local control. So I think this points to the importance of headquartered companies as much as anything. Where a company is based matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about how does this impact Everett? I think Everett's going to be okay, but it is kind of sad. I know they were excited about having the jobs come to Everett, the spending was going to happen in Everett. I personally think that they're going to find something else to replace it. Everett does seem to be up and coming. What do you think? Well,
this is going to be a blow. I mean, it's 200 employees who are losing their jobs. Maybe they have an opportunity to go to North Carolina. Most people probably are not going to take that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things happening in Everett. This is not the old hard scrabble Everett. There's a development on Everett's waterfront right now that's 3 times the size of Seattle's.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
There's hotels and wineries and breweries and condominiums and apartments. And Everett's Marina is going to be one of the destinations in the Pacific Northwest when this is all done. And this is being assembled at a very rapid pace. So Everett is going to be okay. Now, this is, of course, a blow, tax revenue, jobs, and things like that. But I agree with you. I think they are going to find something to replace this. And again, Everett is, if you haven't been to Everett lately, go up there to the marina, the waterfront. There's a lot of construction going on, but there's a lot of the businesses open. It's going to become a cool place. 10 years ago, nobody ever would have said Everett's going to be a cool place.
This section is sponsored by the city of Everett. No, I'm just kidding. But if you do want to sponsor it, let me know. No, I love Everett. I'm excited to go check it out. So yeah, I think that's that story. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so. I mean, Pfizer obviously still gets the 4 drugs that they bought Seagen for. And Pfizer now has 9 oncology drugs in its pipeline. That's pretty impressive.
Okay.
So they didn't necessarily buy Seagen for Washington State or for Everett. They bought it for the research that they have going on right now.
Okay. And you said it's oncology they're focused on. Yeah,
cancer drugs.
Okay.
And they still have that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's going to be cheaper in North Carolina to manufacture than it is up here.
Yeah, probably. Okay. What do we have? Two more for you. Okay. So I chose this one. I think it's a nice feel-good story. We had enough businesses in bankruptcy last episode. So this one is good. Phase Genomics, a Seattle company, lands a $1.5 million grant from the Gates Foundation. Also, I want to give a shout out. I interviewed Kayla Young. She's the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Phase Genomics at an event, and she just super smart woman. I love her. And I'm just really happy that she was able to kind of get this funding. I'm sure she was a huge part of it. So it's a biotech firm, secures this foundation. And I'm going to try and translate this into how we can understand that, because the title I saw was "The Power of Licensed Proteins. They Kill Archaea." And I was like, what is that? What? So what it does, what they're trying to do with this grant is they're going to partner with another local company, Lumen Bioscience, and they're going to spend a year working on this to create something that will help with antibiotic resistance and greenhouse gas emissions. So when I say antibiotic resistance, you can think of, the infection that you get when you have undercooked poultry or you drink untreated water. I think we've all had an experience in a different country with that. That's antibiotic resistance, and that's part of what this would help. And then greenhouse gas emissions, you can think of, the methane gas from cows that would help with that. So, I think what I took away from this is that, when I think about the Gates Foundation, I actually think that their only purpose is eradicating polio from the world, because I just had one friend that works at the Gates Foundation. That's what she was working on. And then I think oftentimes we can forget all of the things that they're doing and how it actually affects us so locally. And I don't know. I just think it's a cool story. What do you think?
GeekWire had a fantastic headline that appealed to the 8th grade boy in me.
Oh, boy.
Phase Genomics is fighting cow burp methane.
Cow burp methane. I love that.
And methane, of course, is the second largest contributor to global warming after CO2. So, but what I think there's a little bit of a misperception about the Gates Foundation. I hear a lot of people criticizing the foundation for not being locally focused enough. They're, fighting malaria, and they're doing things in Africa and third world countries. But over the years, the Gates Foundation has invested billions in things like locally focused nonprofits, community-based organizations, housing, homelessness, social services. And they did give, I think it was $5 million for COVID-19 response.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the fact, again, we talk about headquarters. The Gates Foundation is located here, but it's not true that the Gates Foundation is solely focused on places that are not in Washington State. They've given a lot here, and I don't think they get enough credit for that.
Yeah. Well, then I'm glad we could highlight that today. Absolutely. Well, we'll check back in a year and see if they've fixed everything and they can cure us and global warming. All right. Our last.
But then they can take on the Mideast peace process after that.
Yeah, for sure. They can do anything. Okay. Our last story. Our college athletes employees. I chose this one specifically for you, Rob, because I know you're a sports guy, but this is kind of sports and business.
Big basketball guy too.
Oh yeah. Okay. I also, this is about, the men's college basketball team in Dartmouth. And I also like it because I don't even know this, but I walked on to the D1 soccer team in my college. And then 2 weeks later walked off because I was the worst player. So it's basically the same. I feel I'm the same. And this is super relatable to me. Did you play in college?
I did not play in college. I actually had an opportunity to play in community college, but I was an 18-year-old boy.
Oh, distracted.
I wish I could do it over again.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the story. The National Labor Relations Board, they ruled that the men's college basketball players at Dartmouth are employees and they can vote to unionize. They did vote to unionize recently. But here's the thing. Dartmouth can push back. This can go back to the courts. This is by no means official and moving on. It is an interesting precedent that could be set. I also think it's interesting that, in 2021, most people might know this. Well, I don't know actually, but in 2021, the NCAA agreed that college athletes can get paid endorsement deals. So Nike can sponsor them, Coca-Cola can sponsor them, whatever, and they can earn money from their Instagram. They can earn money from basically anything with their likeness, which was not the case before. Before it was all going straight to the college. So that happened a couple years ago, and now we're seeing these players trying to fight for more rights. So I'm going to let you kind of take a little bit more of this. That was my understanding of the article, but what does it mean to you?
Oh, the NCAA. So first off, unionization would basically allow the players to collectively negotiate with Dartmouth over things like pay, scheduling, and other conditions related to playing. This is far from a done deal. The NLRB is evaluating this. But this ruling, to your point, there's a lot of things happening here. This ruling is probably going to be cited. If the NLRB goes ahead and approves this, I'm certain Dartmouth is going to appeal this in federal court.
Yeah.
But This could be cited in the various lawsuits in progress around the country related to the status of college athletes. For instance, there's one whether athletes are hourly wage employees right now.
Okay.
There's a current lawsuit. There's another one saying that the name, image, likeness thing that you just mentioned, should that apply to athletes prior to 2021?
Oh, like some back pay.
Back pay, basically.
Oh,
and
boy.
because
Okay.
this has been going on,
Right.
this NIL thing has been, the fight for this has been going on for at least a decade, if not more. I believe it started with a player who used to play for UCLA named Ed O'Bannon. So this could have a lot of repercussions. But again, official recognition of the union and collective bargaining and all that implies, in a best case scenario, is still months away, maybe even longer. And I think it's interesting too. This isn't the first time at unionization. I don't know if you remember, you were in San Diego eating hamburgers, but back in 2014, Northwestern University's football team voted to unionize.
Okay.
And because of some procedural reasons, it never did this. So this didn't just pop up.
Okay.
And I think this could set a precedent, especially for smaller colleges, private colleges. This is where we could see more unionization efforts happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I know this story is coming out of Dartmouth, but we obviously have a lot of college athletes here in Seattle. So I think that's why I thought this was relevant. The other thing I was noticing is that the National Labor Relations Board isn't just making decisions on college athletes. They're part of a bigger trend of making it harder for companies to treat people as contractors. I don't know if you've dealt with this, but I think Uber was dealing with that a bit. Whenever I hired a photographer for an event, I had to go through a lot of paperwork. I know when we had to hire freelance writers, we had to go through a lot of paperwork. They're just making it harder. And I get it. Like, it's cheaper. When they're not an employee, you don't have to pay for their health insurance and their benefits and all of these things. And I think that the National Labor Relations Board is trying to protect those employees from getting screwed, basically. Well,
and let's go back to the NCAA. There was an article that came out of The Athletic just a couple of days ago why Nick Saban, the Alabama coach, quit. One of the reasons he resigned, he said, was after they lost to Michigan in the NCAA football semifinal. A lot of the players behaved very poorly. He said it was unsportsmanlike behavior, he thought. And he also said that he was getting hit with, how much money are you going to give me next year? Oh. Am I going to be playing next year? And if not, I'm going to go someplace else and I want to get my money. I even read, and not with Alabama, I even read last season, one of the players said he was not going to go pro because he could make more money in college than he could pro.
Wow. So that's interesting. Okay.
So this really goes to the fact that the NCAA is reeling right now. And I think the NCAA is stepping into some uncharted territory. Who knows what college athletics is going to be in 5 years or 10 years, regardless of what happens with this unionization effort.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know about the other lawsuits, so we'll have to follow that closely. Okay, well, Rob, thank you so much for coming on. I want to give you a chance to plug. You said you do a podcast every couple of weeks for your company. You want to plug that? Where can people hear that?
Yeah, we have the Seattle Magazine podcast. We just finished one with the directors of SIFF, the Seattle International Film Festival, Tom Mara, and the artistic director, Beth Barrett.
I was just talking to them. Oh,
celebrating their 50th year.
Okay.
And we have one coming up on, I think it's March 29th with Chris Novoselic.
Okay. And what's the podcast called?
Seattle Magazine podcast.
Okay, so you can just Google Seattle Magazine and check it out. Awesome. And then I just want to do a quick shout out to Nick Patry. I think
he does our podcast as well.
Nick manages the Cloud Studios and he edits our audio. So he helps the sound of our microphones sound the same level. There's construction going on next door, so sometimes he cuts that sound out. He does a lot to make it sound very smooth in your ears. So shout out to Nick. Thank you. And he does your audio as well, like you said. So.
Well, Rachel, you sound great already, and I know Nick's going to make me sound good. So thank you, Nick. Nice guy.
I certainly hope so. Okay, thanks again, everybody. Remember to follow, subscribe, rate, and if you have anything you want to let me know, you'll hear the email address and the outro. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
This has been The Weekly. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at theweeklyseattle@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.